Hello, thank you for joining me this afternoon on another special edition of Symbolic Sorcery. I am your host, Symbolic Sorcerer, and tonight's show is called An Introduction to the Study of the Tarot. So, I chose some new introduction music, and I hope you guys like that. That was Steve Roach with Stephen Kent on the didgeridoo. So, that's a good shamanic way to kick things off here into the tarot, because we really are journeying into the shamanic underworld realms of the deep subconscious when we explore the tarot. So that's why I've chosen that music for tonight's show. So to get things going, what we're going to be discussing this afternoon is the basic approach to the study of the tarot. So we're going to be talking about the basic ideas on what is the tarot, and we're going to talk about how you can immerse yourself into the tarot and really start studying and understanding and integrating these teachings into your life so that you can use them for self-development. Now, one of the major obstacles that people have in getting into tarot study is how much disciplined regularity it requires. It really requires daily effort of going in to the cards and really picking them apart and analyzing and thinking about what the symbols mean and how they fit together into a general understanding. You almost want to be asking yourself, what was the motive of putting this symbol where it is, and why the symbol is what it is, and so what it's related to, and things like that. So as far as what is the tarot, it's really more than just a conglomeration of symbols. It's more than just this encyclopedia of symbols. As an overall collection of cards, it really is to be thought of as a book of ageless wisdom. And so by ageless wisdom, I'm not talking about anything New Age, anything ancient or Atlantean or Egyptian or whatever. This is truly ageless wisdom, the true understanding of life and our place in the universe. So when we come to understand and approach the tarot in this way, it's actually what we need to have, so like a prerequisite in order to really get into the deeper understandings that aren't really able to be expressed in words. These are pure ideas that we come across. So what we need to talk about tonight is some foundational things for later shows that will be going in depth into tarot. So I wanted to have a show just on very basic introductory ideas on the tarot, so we all stand on a common ground with a mutual understanding. So really we have to understand a lot of the background on my ideas on tarot, and most of it, if not a vast majority, comes from a very great teacher named Paul Foster Case. And Paul Foster Case, we kind of think of today as really a master tarot teacher. He may not have been a master in the sense of how that's thought of in theosophy or something like that. I mean that he was a master teacher, that his ability of teaching the meaning of the tarot was so far beyond what has ever come before or really after since then. People have built on the groundwork that he has laid, but really, as far as historical teachings of tarot, no one had really devoted their whole life to becoming a teacher of this entire system in terms of its symbolism and ageless wisdom interpretations. So Paul Foster Case had studied tarot from a very, very young age, and eventually went on to join a branch of the Golden Dawn in New York. It was the Alpha et Omega branch of the Golden Dawn that went with Mathers after the whole schism. And so Paul Foster Case worked directly under Mona Mathers, who was S.L. McGregor Mathers' wife. S.L. McGregor Mathers was sort of the high magus of the Golden Dawn when it was in its heyday. So Paul Foster Case had quickly ascended through the outer grades of the Golden Dawn because he had already achieved certain degrees of adeptship through his own self-initiation, working with the tarot, working with Eastern yoga practices. So by the time he got to the Golden Dawn, he was able to very quickly get to the inner order of the RR et AC, the Rosea Rubea et Aurea Crucis, which is the Ruby Rose and the Golden Cross, which is the inner order of the Golden Dawn. So the Golden Dawn is really the outer order of this inner body of adepts. So Paul Foster Case was initiated into the adept level of Zelator Adeptus Minor in the Golden Dawn. The story from then kind of there's not much details on how long Paul Foster Case was in the Golden Dawn, but it is known that he did serve as a teacher and hierophant for at least a few years, not for any length of time. And then there was some disagreements between his philosophy and approach, his openness of the mysteries, that led to him eventually leaving the Golden Dawn and founding his own order. So not too long after that, he founded the School of Ageless Wisdom, which was the precursor to the order that still exists to this day, which is called Builders of the Adytum. Builders of the Adytum is probably the main school of the Ageless Wisdom mystery school tradition that has kept and maintained correspondence lessons that anyone interested in the mysteries can apply for membership to study in this school. Now, Paul Foster Case felt that his understanding of the tarot and through what he had acquired through inner wisdom was enough that he needed to have his own tarot deck to really correspond to how he saw everything fitting together. So in the early 1930s, Paul Foster Case had a artist, woman by the name of Jessie Burns Park drew a tarot deck for Case, and because it was to be used for Case's school, the Builders of the Adytum, part of the lessons were that you would color the cards yourself. So the cards were originally just drawn in black and white outline, and they would be filled in by the student through the coloring exercises that were done during the lessons, or the coloring project, sorry. So what ended up happening is that Paul Foster Case successfully ran Builders of the Adytum for the rest of his life, and so that was, he was born in I think 1886 and died in 1954. So he ran Builders of the Adytum from the early 1930s until 1954. Late in his career, he had trained a woman by the name of Ann Davies into this high level of adeptship, and was able to pass on this adeptship to Ann Davies, who then ran the order until her death in 1975. So Ann Davies added a lot of new teachings onto what Paul Foster Case had already done. So the teachings and the lessons and courses are available as correspondence lessons that you would get through the mail, and range from various topics to from practical occultism, from tarot to Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, just all of the main body of Hermetic wisdom. It's said that Builders of the Adytum is the graduate school of mystery schools, and by the time initiates work their way through the whole curriculum, they will have acquired the equivalent of several PhDs. So Paul Foster Case had written the first series of correspondence lessons, which were about 5 to 6 years worth of curriculum, I believe, and then Ann Davies later added another almost 10 years of curriculum. So the total B.O.T.A. curriculum is almost 15 years of weekly lessons. So it is really the most complete school for study of the mysteries. Now, there are other mystery schools, and they teach various things. Like Golden Dawn emphasizes ceremonial more than a lot of other things. So it depends on what you're looking for as an initiate and what you're developing towards, whether it is what if it's something for you or not. So that's Paul Foster Case, the background behind his teaching. And so, like I said, he's really a master tarot teacher, and most, if not all, of what I have learned about the tarot is from studying his lessons and his tarot deck. So we have to be very clear in this show. When I'm talking about tarot symbolism and I'm talking about specific symbols on the tarot, I'm talking about the Builders of the Adytum tarot deck, the one that Case designed. So if some of you have seen this, you'd know that it sort of looks like the weight deck. The major arcana pictures look a heck of a lot like the weight deck, and some people, when they first see it, think it's the exact same, or just about. But not to much investigation is needed to see that there are some major, major differences, and not too much practical work and meditation is needed to see that there are some super, super differences in the type of meditational state that you can achieve through the weight deck picture versus the B.O.T.A deck picture, because the B.O.T.A deck, the symbols are more harmonious with transcendent states of consciousness. And these symbols were specifically designed to have that effect. On the other hand, the weight deck is based on the same general patterns, but Waite felt the need to sort of not really confuse the symbolism, but he wanted to make a popular tarot that would be used by all people, and the Waite deck, of course, has become sort of the modern standard for tarot in terms of kind of reference point that everyone can agree on. So, if we want to ask the question, what is tarot? I said before, we want to think of it as a book of ageless wisdom. Now, let's be clear. The tarot doesn't teach us anything that we don't already know. It brings out the teachings from within. We have inside us the life power, which is our vital livingness, and that gives us access to almost unlimited streams of wisdom and knowledge. We just have to learn how we can tap into this area so that we can start to receive this wisdom. And it's really a process. It starts off where the wisdom is kind of here and there, but as you get into it more and more and start living it more and more, then the wisdom becomes ever present. The wisdom is always there for you to call upon. You kind of just need to quiet your mind and listen for it. But we need to have the patterns in place in order for our superconscious levels to be able to communicate this wisdom to us, because it communicates the wisdom to us through symbolism, which is the language of subconsciousness. And that's really the main importance of why tarot works the way it does, is because it uses the language of subconsciousness. And subconsciousness is based on pictures and images and associations and relationships. So in a tarot card where we have all sorts of images and pictures, we unfold the secret wisdom through connecting the hidden relationships between the symbols that are shown on the card. So let me say that again. The wisdom of the tarot is unfolded through analyzing and connecting up the various associations between the ideas symbolized by each image or each individual symbol on the card. And that's really how you meditate with the tarot and get into these states of consciousness that are shown on the cards. Now, that sounds like a really advanced understanding of what's shown here, but really it's not. When you get into the cards at a certain level, you start to understand that the cards are teaching you how to study the cards. It's really amazing how it works. So, with tarot being the language of subconsciousness, we look at the cards, we attune ourselves to the cards, we meditate in a circular fashion around a central idea, as I was talking about in the last show on symbolism and the introduction to the esoteric language of symbols. So you may want to go back and review that show to see what we talked about there for meditating with symbols. And the idea is we're spiraling around a central idea through forming chains of association, of free association. We spiral into this central point through meditation and then become perfectly identified with this central point. And the wisdom that is in the higher dimensional levels of consciousness flows out through this central point. And that's where we can begin to receive this body of wisdom. And so, like I said, the wisdom is not something that is coming from outside, it's coming from within, but we just need to learn how to open up to it. We need to learn how to understand how it can be told to us, because it can only be told to us through symbols and pictures and not through words. So, like I said before, even when we start looking at the tarot from the very beginning, it's actually teaching us how we unfold this wisdom through stages. Like if we start with the Fool is about the life power and the vital living essence in all things. And it comes to us in the form of light from the sun in its purest form. And this light is the subtle life energy that's flowing through our energy body, through our chakras and so on, in our aura. It's this all-pervading life energy that is sometimes called Ruach in Kabbalah. It's called prana in Sanskrit. So the Fool represents this all power. When we start thinking about the Fool, that taps us into the idea that there is a life inside us that was never born and will never end, and that's our spiritual life. And it's not really ours, it's really universal. It's the same life that lives in all things. What the Fool teaches us is that this power has no limit, and so therefore we have perfect freedom. But in its perfectly free state, as it's shown in the Fool, it's not expressed yet. It's just potential. In order to have it be expressed, we need to get into the Magician. So when we start looking at the Magician in tarot, it starts teaching our subconsciousness that we need to watch and pay attention and observe and look closely at the cards and concentrate. It's about concentration. So when we concentrate, what we're doing, it's just like orange juice concentrate. You know, the little frozen things of orange juice you get at the store, it's a concentrate, and you add water to it. And so you could think of concentration as collecting together units of force into a smaller space. And that's what you're doing when you're concentrating. You're concentrating that life power of the Fool into a smaller space. And when you make this space a tarot card, so you concentrate all this infinite energy onto a tarot card, that's what you're doing when you're looking at the tarot. What happens after that, when we observe, is that we record internally what we're looking at. and that's the High Priestess. The High Priestess inside of us is recording everything we observe about the tarot, and it's remembering. The High Priestess is all about memory. So she remembers everything we see in the cards. And what happens, she represents subconsciousness. She sort of goes to work below the threshold of our ordinary awareness and develops the consequences of what we've paid attention to. And so if it's the tarot, she will develop the consequences of the sort of logical deductions of what we have thought about and analyzed and observed in the cards. And what happens after that is she brings forth new ideas and new pictures about the underlying wisdom in the cards. And when she brings forth new ideas, that's the Empress. Now she's fertile in bringing forth new life. And those are the new ideas that were inherent in the things we originally observed in the tarot. So we look at the tarot, we're actually concentrating this life essence that gets put into subconsciousness, who then forms logical deductions on what we're looking at and tells us the underlying hidden wisdom in what we're seeing. And that process is shown as the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, and then the Empress. So as soon as we start looking at the tarot, it's actually teaching us how it's going to unfold the wisdom that's hidden in the cards. And actually you can go on from there. So many of you know that the Emperor will follow the Empress. And really the Emperor is about reasoning and forming patterns and plans and overall maps of these new ideas that we get from the High Priestess, and so on. And in future shows, we're going to be looking at a detailed analysis of each tarot card and how these all fit together. So for today's show, we're going to be looking at basic things we can do to understand the tarot. So we've talked about how we can look at the cards to unfold the hidden wisdom. We also want to have a list of correspondences for each of the cards. So one of the first things you do in studying Paul Foster Case's work is you learn about the symbolism of numbers, you learn about the symbolism of the Hebrew letters, you learn about the symbolism of the paths on the Tree of Life, and the astrological symbolism that's associated with that. There's other correspondences, like colors, notes, shapes, and so on, that we could use to help get deeper and deeper into these areas of consciousness represented by each of the tarot keys. So really we want to think of each tarot card as a key. And what do keys do? Well, keys are used to unlock doors. What are these doors? Well, these are the doors in our subconsciousness that open and close to either let out new ideas or let us in to new areas of consciousness. So that's what we're trying to be doing in the tarot. We're trying to unlock these doors using the tarot keys. We get into these areas of consciousness. We receive the wisdom that we need, and then we return and apply this wisdom through our life experience. And we'll be getting into more of that in future shows. So when we have a list of correspondences, we can make our meditations a lot more all-encompassing. We start to see the tarot everywhere. Once we have attached a number to each tarot card, then every time we see that number, it makes us think of that tarot key. So other things like the objects associated with the Hebrew letters. The letter Beth associated with the magician means house, and a house makes us think of a fixed location, something where life experience is played out. And everything in a house has a fixed location. So the idea of a fixed location makes us think of concentration and attention, because when we're concentrating, we are putting our attention at a fixed location for a length of time. So when we use these correspondences, we can start to turn the wheel of our meditations a lot quicker by going through these lists of correspondences to start the meditation. Makes us think of all these things that are associated with the tarot card, from the meanings of the numbers to the meanings of the letters to the paths to the astrological meanings. That gets the wheel turning for us. We start spiraling in towards the central point of the area of consciousness that's shown by the card through further meditation. But we have to memorize the correspondences in order to do that, because you can't be looking up correspondences to do your meditation. You have to internalize them. And so this is the point where a lot of people fall away out of the tarot study, is because they don't want to do the disciplined regularity that it takes in the beginning. And so I can remember back to my early experience with tarot study, where the amount of time I spent internalizing these correspondences took months. It took months to go through every single day, and basically I would shuffle up my deck of cards and turn them over and then go through them one at a time and see if I could remember all of the correspondences. So like I said, it took months, but it was totally worth it, because that implanted all those correspondences in my consciousness. And now my subconscious is going to work on deciphering the hidden meanings of all of these correspondences. And then when you pile that on top of daily tarot study, it just gets to be where we start crystallizing these thought forms in these areas to a much higher level. So correspondences are extremely important in getting your tarot study off the ground, because you need to have sort of a field to work in for each card. Now, after we've got the basic correspondences memorized, we can start to examine overall patterns. And this gets really interesting when we get into looking at the global patterns that are in the tarot. So global patterns are like, how do all the cards fit together into a coherent whole? Tarot deck consists of 78 cards, as many of you know. And this is 56 cards in the minor arcana, and 22 cards in the major arcana. So we'll start by looking at the minor arcana. Now the minor arcana consists of 16 court cards and 40, well, what you might call numbered cards or spot cards. And in the B.O.T.A tarot deck for the minors, they only show, like if it's the Six of Cups, it would just show 6 cups. It's not like the weight deck where Mrs. Smith, who drew the deck, had given a pictorial representation for the minor arcana. The true way to use the minor arcana is to have just the number of things. So if it's the Six of Cups, you'd see 6 cups. And we'll talk about why that's better to do it that way. It's not, it's harder to do divination with that, but once you understand the pattern that's shown there, then you can do divination a lot better because you know the area of consciousness that's being represented there. So we've got 4 suits in the minor arcana, and the 4 suits are the wands, the cups, the swords, and the pentacles. And so the 4 suits correspond to the 4 elements and the 4 worlds of the Kabbalah. So wands correspond to the element of fire and the world of Absoluth, or the archetypal world, the world of ideas. Cups correspond to water and the world of Bria, creative world, or the world of images, or the world of consciousness. And then we go on to the swords that represent the element of air, the world of Yetzirah, or the world of formation. And then we have the pentacles, which are earth, and that is Asaya, the material world. So there's all of these patterns that the tarot is sort of a map of. The tarot is sort of a hyperdimensional map of all of these spiritual systems. So there's 4 suits: wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. In each suit we have 4 court cards. We have the king, queen, knight, and page, and we have 10 numbered cards. The 10 numbered cards correspond to the 10 Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, and in the last episode we had a meditation on how the 10 Sephiroth are created as described in the Sephir Yetzirah, or the Book of Formation. Now the Kabbalistic correspondence to the court cards are: the king is Ab, the father; queen is Ayama, the mother; the knight is Ben, the son; and the page is Kala, the bride. And so in later shows we can talk about what this Kabbalistic idea, so this is sometimes called the 4 divine personalities of Ab, Ayma, Ben, and Kala. So that comes out of the Sephir HaZohar, which went into an analysis of the meanings of those 4 divine personalities and how that relates to the Tree of Life. Now when we look at the major arcana, there's some very interesting patterns. One of the first things that strikes out on the major arcana is that there's 22, and so that corresponds to the 22 Hebrew letters. Once we have a correspondence to the Hebrew letters, then we can put the tarot keys on the Tree of Life, because each path on the Tree of Life corresponds to a Hebrew letter. As we talked about in the meditation on last show on the Sefer Yetzirah on Chapter 1, it divides the 22 letters into a pattern of 3, 7, and 12. And so those are the 3 mother letters, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, the 7 double letters, which are Beth, Gimel, Daleth, Kaf, Pei, Resh, and Tav, and the 12 simple letters, which are He, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Teth, Yod, Lamed, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Tzadi, and Kof. So those are how we would divide up the 22 Hebrew letters into a 3, 7, 12 pattern. 3 mothers, 7 double, 12 simple. Then we divide the tarot up into 3, 7, and 12. And that's a very interesting way to start looking at the tarot, is take out the letters for Aleph, Mem, and Shin, the mother letters. And so that's the Fool, the Hanged Man, and Judgment. And start to look at the relationships between what you find in the symbolism of each of those cards and how they relate to each other and how those relate to the 3 mother letters in Kabbalah. And then go on to the 7 and look at how the 7 are all related to each other, and then into the 12. Now this 3, 7, and 12 is a harmonic pattern from sacred geometry, because in sacred geometry we know that there are three major anchors in the astral body. There are 7 main points in the etheric life body, and there are 12 main points in the physical body. And the 12 also correspond to the 12 zodiacal signs, the 7 correspond to the 7 planets, and the 3 correspond to 3 elements, air, water, and fire, where earth is not shown as an element because of various Kabbalistic reasons. Now, there's the 3, 7, 12 pattern in the tarot because of the 3, 7, 12 in the Hebrew letters. Now, there is also a way we can put the tarot keys, the major arcana, onto the Sephiroth, onto the Tree of Life. And so we just use the numbers. And if there's a number greater than 10, then we would reduce the digits by adding the digits. So, well, the Fool would be the limitless light that's above the Tree of Life, and the Magician, number 1, would be Kether, number 2, the High Priestess, would be Chokmah, and so on. So once we get to the double-digit cards, like take Temperance, key 14, we would reduce the digits. 1 plus 4 is equal to 5, and so Temperance would correspond to Geburah. And so then we would look at how the symbolism between Geburah and Temperance correspond to each other. Then what we can look at is the cube of space. If you remember from last show, when we did the meditation on Chapter 1 of Sefer Yetzirah, talked about the creation of the 6 dimensions of space, where we went into how the directions of space were projected outward from a central point and then sealed using the 6 permutations of the divine name Yahweh, which is Yod He Vav. So we can use that same idea. We have 3 directions in space, and when we seal each direction, that gives us a cube. So we're sitting now at the center of a cube when we sealed these 6 directions, because there's 6 faces on a cube. A cube also has 12 edges, and these are the 12 keys of the major arcana that correspond to the 12 zodiacal signs or the 12 simple letters. And so that 3, 7, and 12 can come up in the cube of space as well. The 3 are the 3 dimensions. The 7 are, you have 6 faces and 1 point at the center. They count the center point along with the 6 faces. And then there's 12 edges. So there's the 3, 7, and 12 in the cube of space. So we can analyze the tarot from the point of view of how it's mapped onto the cube of space. And if we find symmetries in the cube of space, then we should look for symmetries in the tarot symbolism. So there's so much that we could do in looking at that. And there's even a book that's now been written by a man named Kevin Townley, wrote an entire book on the cube of space. And then after that, he made a follow-up volume called Meditations on the Cube of Space, which is, those are some some really great books you guys should get. Once we look at the cube of space, then we could look at what's called the tableau, or the tarot tableau. The tarot tableau shows what's called the 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment. And what it does is it lines up keys 1 through 7 along the top row, keys 8 through 14 along the second row, and then keys 15 through 21 along the last row. And the Fool is kind of left out and just thought of as the traveler who goes through this process. So this tableau arrangement gives us 7 columns, and these 7 columns are the 7 stages of spiritual unfoldment. And this is one of the major patterns that is responsible for the core symbolism that we find in the tarot, is through the tableau. Like, for example, the first stage is called bondage, and it has the magician on the top, it has strength in the middle, and the devil in the bottom. And we're going to do a series of shows on the 7 stages, but just to mention briefly what's shown there is that the things we pay attention to are impressed upon our subconsciousness, and those are sort of fed into our subconsciousness. So strength, what's shown there is that we're kind of feeding this power inside us, shown as the lion. What we normally do is feed ourselves images of bondage, and that's shown as the devil. We normally feed ourselves images of how we're separate and we have to muster all these personal forces to impose our will, whatever that means. We learn that this is all a lie, that really the true understanding is not that we're separate, is that we're all one. The true understanding is oneness. So that's how we get beyond the first stage of bondage, is that we start feeding our subconsciousness patterns of oneness. And that's what we find all through the tarot. That's almost, you could say, the purpose of tarot, is to be the prima materia that we feed to our subconsciousness that turns it into the gold of pure wisdom. And we do this through this disciplined study, is really the only way to do it. So these teachings have a way of keeping themselves secret and sacred, because it's only available to those who can put aside their personal desires to try to understand eternal truths. And so you have to have a dedication to eternal truth in order to find the disciplined regularity that you need to have the wisdom come to you through the tarot. So we've looked at the 3, 7, and 12. We've looked at the Tree of Life. We've looked at the Cube of Space, the Tableau. There's also a pattern that I've not seen anyone write about, and that is that we can find the Tetragrammaton in the major arcana. Now, this is something I've discovered through my own research, is that there's a way that we could look at the major arcana in terms of the Tetragrammaton, or the four-lettered name in the Kabbalah. And I might even do a special show just on that to talk about my research, because when I had discovered that, it led to some major breakthroughs that has given me the ability to speak about these things with this level of understanding. Now, the way it works is basically that we have the Tetragrammaton as this four-lettered name, sort of representing a process of divine creation or manifestation. And so the letters are Yod, He, Vav, He. Yod represents sort of the fiery life force or living essence, and He is the sort of the water or the forms of consciousness that this living essence projects itself into, so that it can have a vessel or a vehicle where it can express itself through consciousness. Then the letter Vav represents joining these two principles together as a balanced whole. And then the final letter He represents another final crystallization and solidification of this process that has gone on from above. And so that's sometimes represented also as the four elements, how you start with the fire, the fiery life essence, and that's projected into the water of consciousness. Those two are joined together through air, which is sort of like intellect, and then the three of those are mingled harmoniously in the element of earth. So that's sort of two ways of thinking about the Tetragrammaton. Now, the Tetragrammaton pattern in the tarot starts like this, that we look at the four worlds, and we think of, okay, so the four worlds also correspond to the Tetragrammaton through the four elements. And so the world of Absoluth is Yod, and the creative world is He, the world of Yetzirah is Vav, and the world of Asaya is He final. So the way it works is like this. In the Absoluthic world, we would expect to find a fractal recursion of the Tetragrammaton, because Tetragrammaton means basically reality or manifestation or manifested reality, sometimes translated as that which was, is, and will be. So with that idea, we would expect to find the pattern of manifestation also occurring in the Absoluthic world. And so we put the Tetragrammaton in the Absoluthic world, and in each of the four worlds. And so how it works is this. Tetragrammaton in the Absoluthic world is the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, and the Empress. And so if you line those four up with Yod He Vav He, you'll start to see what is going on with some secrets for manifestation. Then the Empress becomes Yod of the creative world. And so the next four, but we have to make our next beginning point be the ending point from before. So the next Tetragrammaton is the Empress, the Emperor, the Hierophant, the Lovers. And then after that, the next Tetragrammaton is the Lovers, then the Chariot, then Strength, and then the Hermit, and so on. some major keys to understanding that pattern are what is expressed in the Hermetic dictum of as above, so below. Because what we get when we have this Tetragrammaton arrangement is we get two squares of 4 by 4, and all 21 keys exactly line up in these two squares. And so what it shows in my interpretation is the involution of Tetragrammaton through the 4 worlds into the material world, and then the ascent, the return up through the 4 worlds and back to spirit. And that is exactly the pattern that's shown there. So I want to say just a few more things. Now I know there's just a few minutes left, and I wanted to have a quick meditation on the show. So what you might want to do is replay this later and kind of pause it and relax a little bit first. So let's assume you're in a relaxed meditative state. Now imagine a circle being drawn around you. And on this circle are the 22 major arcana. So imagine yourself sitting at the center of a circle, and around you you've got the 22 major arcana, and you can see all of them. And you can see that these keys are showing you all of the powers and forces of consciousness that are making up your awareness. And so your consciousness is being built by these 22 keys, or these 22 tarot keys. So you can imagine yourself sitting at the center of a circle and the keys around you, and then imagine that all of the 22 keys project a beam of light toward the center of your being. And this makes you realize that everything you are, everything you've ever done, has been an expression of these 22 areas of consciousness. And that what you can do to understand yourself, to know thyself, is to start understanding these 22 tarot keys. So if you sit in this meditative state for a while and think about this and come back to this, then I think this will help you start to see the need for why we should put forth the effort that's required to get into the tarot. Because my last thing that I want to mention is that there is an ultimate mystery of tarot. And the ultimate mystery of tarot is this: thou art. The ultimate mystery of tarot is you, that you are the tarot, that you are the 22 major arcana. You are the minor arcana. You are the court cards. And so from now on, whenever you see the cards, imagine and say to yourself that I am this consciousness. I am what's shown here in this tarot key. So we will talk about that in more shows in detailed analysis. So I want to leave you with that idea of a circle of all cards. You're at the center, and they're projecting themselves to the center of your being, awakening you up, and we're going to talk about that in more shows, so stick with us on Symbolic Sorcery.